So let's go back into front view. All right, so we have a object here on the middle. So how do we move this around? Well, there's a couple ways to move an object around. This widget here, see these arrows here. You have the widget control here where you can turn that on or off. You have a translate widget, option, manipulator. You have a rotation manipulator, and you have a scale manipulator. Now, once again, you can use these. If I grab this top blue arrow, I can move him up and down, and it constrains it to my Z-axis. Another key you want to know is a hotkey you want to know is Control Z undoes. So whatever you do, you can Control Z and it'll take you back. All right, so let me go back into front view here. But what we want to try to use hotkeys as much as we can. So let's hit the hotkey G. If I hit the hotkey G and do not hit any buttons on my mouse, I can move it around. Now I'm moving this only, since I'm in front view in orthogonal, I'm only moving this in the X and the Z direction. I'm not moving it in the Y direction because I am only moving it in the perpendicular axes of the view I'm looking in. So I can move it around and it'll just move in those axes. Now if I'm, like I said, I'm not pushing any buttons while I'm moving this. Oops, he kind of went off the screen there. And so if I got it up here and I say, oh, well, I don't want this up here, what I can do is I can right click and it'll cancel out that move. If I grab it and move it around and say, oh, I like here, I can left click and it accepts the move. Now I can always say, well, I don't like that, and I can do Control Z and that cancels that out. Now if you see, like I said, if I'm in this front view, I'm only moving perpendicular. Now if I'd angle a little bit like this, where I'm not really in I'm not perpendicular to any axes itself, I'm just kind of out in space. Now if I hit grab and I move here, I'm moving in actually all three axes. So if I go 1, I've moved over a little bit on the X. If I go 3, I've moved, well, not too much, but a little bit on the Y. And if I go 7, I moved a little bit on the Y, not much. So, like I said, if I want to go there, and I can just Control Z and I go right back to where I was. Cancels that out. Now, and when I use the manipulators, I was able to constrain it to an axis, but that's very easy with the hotkeys too. So if I hit grab, and I hit nothing else, but I follow that with whatever axes I want to be constrained to. So if I want to be constrained on the X axis, I hit X. Now I can only move on the X axis. As you can see in the right bottom left hand, you can see the numbers, how they kind of change, but it's only in the X axis. I'm not moving on the Y or the Z. So I can left click out that. And I can do this with any axis. So I can grab and then followed by Z, will constrain to the Z axis, and grab and Y will constrain on the Y axis. So the other thing I wanted to do was here is we had the rotate widget down here, but instead of using it, the hotkey for rotate is R. Now if I'm in R and I'm in a certain axis, I'm moving on, I'm only rotating perpendicular to that axis. If I want to constrain to an axis, it's R followed by whatever axis I want to be constrained to. So if I only want him to rotate around the X-axis, I hit R for rotate and then X-axis. And then he will only rotate around the X-axis. And the same thing with Y-axis. We had the widget down here for scale. Now if I hit S, I'll scale him, but if I just hit S and then move my mouse without any other buttons, he scales. I can scale him up and scale him down. You can see in the bottom, he'll tell him what percentage he's scaling. So 1, 1, 1 would be his normal scale, and you can see everything's just scaling evenly. So if I want to make him twice as big, I can just move it up to 2, a little bit over 2, you know. If I left click it, it goes out of that mode. Actually, that's something I want to bring up. If you scale and you know what number you want to scale to, this works with rotate, grab, or scale. Grab is in blender units. So one of these squares is 1 blender unit by 1 blender unit. Okay? So let's say I want to move this monkey 2 places over on the in the negative x direction. Well, what I could do is I could say grab x, and then I type in -2. And he's moved over one square, 2 squares. So you can actually do exacts like that. If I want to rotate him on the y-axis 90 degrees, I can do rotate y and then type in 90. And there he's rotated 90 degrees. All right, so also the scales, if I have him scaling, instead of just scaling him in one direction, I can constrain that also. So I can do scale x, and he only scales on the x direction. Scale z, it scales in z. Same way with y. But I can also do this, if I want to make him twice as big, I can do scale 2. And I've made him twice as big. Let's cancel all of that.